Great. Well, thank you very much indeed, Annie, for the introduction. And hi, everybody. Great to be here today to present today. I'm going to be sharing some of CCS Insight's latest consumer research. And let's just move on to the next slide. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Kester Mann. I'm Director of Consumer and Connectivity at CCS Insight. I've been commentating on telecoms markets for about 20 years now. I'm going to take about 25 minutes or so to share my presentation, and then more than happy to, of course, take questions at the end. Before we get underway, very quickly, 60 seconds on my company, CCS Insight. We are a research and advisory company based in London. We also have offices on the West Coast. We've been researching the telecoms and technology markets for 25 years now. We have more than 30 staff, and we have a pretty extensive range of services, as you can see here. We span multiple sectors, telecom operators, enterprise, 5G, wearables, workplace transformation, network infrastructure, and plenty more besides. And we also got a pretty extensive client list as well, as you can see from the slide. So let's get on to it. And as Annie said, I'm going to be talking about a piece of consumer research that we took to market in December last year, looking at the buying journey for mobile services and devices. So looking at how purchasing behaviour in the UK has evolved. This was our fifth annual survey, and we spoke to 1,000 people in the UK online. And the research was representative of the UK population, as we can see by population, age and region. And it's important to note before I start showing some of the findings that what we were actually specifically looking at was people's own views and experiences with their primary mobile phone for personal use. So we're ignoring enterprise devices and secondary devices and so on. So first of all, we basically looked at what mobile phone people are actually using. What's their primary device? Looked at the ownership. And this is really interesting. We saw in our research that Apple and Samsung have very much increased their dominance of the UK mobile phone market, while other brands have lost share over the past few years. So as we can see here, more than 3/4 of the people we spoke to, 78%, now either own a Samsung phone or an iPhone. That's from the right-hand chart here, which excludes people that said they don't know in response to our question. And in particular, we can see that Apple's share, which is shown in green here, has grown. So 37% of respondents in 2019, up to 46% in 2022. And actually what we've noticed significantly is that we've seen some switching from Samsung to Apple. Just to be 100% clear on this slide, we're talking here about the installed base of mobile phones rather than sales. So therefore this includes second-hand devices and pre-owned phones, hand-me-downs, and so on. I think the slightly scary thing for the industry when I look at this slide is that some of the challenger brands, such as Alcatel TCL, OnePlus, Oppo, Xiaomi, etc., have kind of been unable to capitalise on the loss of market share that we've seen from some of the more traditional players in the industry, like Nokia and Sony and Huawei. Actually, what's happened is that the UK market has become more concentrated around Apple and Samsung. Now, we've probed as well into the cost of living crisis and mobile phone price rises, and I want to share a couple of our findings in this area. Certainly in terms of people's response to the cost of living crisis, we asked people what they have done or plan to do as a direct result of the cost of living crisis. And I was actually quite surprised with the responses we saw here, with many people prompted to review their telecom purchases. Notably, about 4 in 10 people actually highlighted having downgraded or potentially planning to downgrade their plan with a mobile or broadband provider. Now, of course, there's a difference clearly between saying you expect to do something and actually carrying it out, but I do see in our research a clear motivation to respond to this clearly very challenging period of economic instability. And actually other people went even further still, saying that they plan to switch their provider altogether, which potentially could result in an uptick in churn in the UK, which is, for those of you who aren't aware, at historically very low levels. One final thing from this slide I found really interesting is the bar at the very bottom. Actually, some people said that they have brought forward or indeed plan to bring forward a mobile phone purchase. And we believe this perhaps is because either they expect prices to go up further in the future, or maybe they want to make a purchase before economic conditions deteriorate still further. So we also probed into annual price rises. And for those of you who aren't aware, most providers in the UK now implement inflation-linked price increases each April. And for many, this has meant a rise of more than 10%. So about a third of people said that their mobile bill was affected by a price rise in 2022, although we actually believe the number is higher still. Bear in mind that not all mobile plans, such as pay-as-you-go, are impacted by annual price rises, and also some providers, such as Tesco Mobile and Sky Mobile, decided not to implement any price rises at all. Crucially, over 4 in 10 people told us who told us they were impacted by price rises indicated that they had done something about it, and we can see that on the yellow chart on the right-hand side there. And for some, that resulted in some pretty important changes. So 16% of people said that they negotiated a better deal with their provider, 14% moved to a cheaper plan, and 8% changed their provider altogether. Okay, changing tack a little bit, a new element of our research this year was around the emerging smartphone category of foldables. And we're actually quite encouraged by some of the findings from this part of the research that, for me at least, offer some positivity to a segment of the industry that's been very much under pressure over the last several years. So nearly 9 in 10 people said that they had heard of a foldable smartphone, and just for clarity, respondents were given a picture to illustrate the type of device that they're referring to when answering this question. And younger age groups, perhaps unsurprisingly, showed the greatest awareness. And in fact, 96% of 16 to 24-year-olds had heard of a foldable smartphone. And as I'm sure you're aware, Samsung, as a case of one provider, has been particularly active in TV advertising around foldables. And 4 in 10 people have told us that they have seen a foldable smartphone in real life. And for me, I think that's pretty significant, given that very few people currently actually own a foldable smartphone. So it shows that those that are out there are getting noticed. We also asked about how appealing foldable smartphone ownership would be. And we're looking at the left-hand chart here initially that shows that over half of people, 51%, said that owning a foldable smartphone would be appealing. So that's 15% who said it would be very appealing, and 36% that it would be quite appealing. And perhaps more crucially, there is intention to purchase as well. So on the right-hand chart, we can see that 46% of people said it is either very likely or fairly likely that they would consider buying a foldable smartphone next time they upgrade or change their mobile phone. Now, it should be noted that this question was asked without sharing any details at all on pricing, and of course, many foldables are extremely expensive, usually over £1,000 if bought outright. But my view is, based on some of our research here, if the industry can get the price of foldables down, it could potentially become a popular category in the long term. And then, still on the foldable theme, we asked what the main reason would be for people to consider getting a foldable smartphone, and why would they want to do that. And I think, encouragingly again for me, the main reasons here relate specifically to the device itself. So the compactness, 53% saying that, the size of the display, 34%. And I think that's good news because it shows that people are interested in more than just getting something new and something different. Actually, it seems that they're genuinely quite keen on the concept. That being said, only 5 people cited the multitasking benefit of foldable smartphones, suggesting, I think, that the market has plenty more to do to educate customers about what, for me at least, is one of the most important points of a foldable smartphone. And then we asked about what's putting people off buying a foldable smartphone. And the main reason here actually is they're largely very content with the current mobile phone they've already got. And I think this, for me, is indicative, certainly, of the wider challenges for the smartphone sector to try and drive new demand and stimulate replacement. About a third of people said that foldable smartphones are too expensive, and I mentioned earlier we didn't disclose the cost of these devices, so people either already know that or just assume that this would be a premium category. And just over a quarter of people said that they were worried about damaging a foldable smartphone, and for me that's a very understandable concern given the very high prices. Okay, I want to touch a little bit on some of our research on channel and ways that people buy and how they buy, and in particular the trends around online purchases and in-store purchases. So we asked about which statement best describes how your phone was bought, and despite COVID restrictions lifting, our research very much showed a growing influence of online across the entire mobile purchasing journey. So more than half of the people in the survey, 55%, told us they bought their current mobile phone for personal use online, and that's up from 47% in our 2018 survey. That's the green bars here. And this is clearly substituting some sales in stores, which is the blue bar here, which fell again in our latest survey to 35%. The most likely age group to buy online, perhaps unsurprisingly, is the younger age group, 16 to 24-year-olds. 64% said that they bought in this way. And then finally on this one, interestingly, the telephone still remains a relatively important channel as well, representing about 7% of sales, likely reflecting operators' strong efforts to retain subscribers that are nearing the end of their contracts. Now, as I alluded to earlier, our research actually showed that online is touching the entire mobile purchasing journey, and I think that perhaps in the past there may have been a little bit of a misconception around this, that perhaps people thought that many sales, perhaps the journey started in a shop and then finished online, but actually more than twice as many people said that they researched their mobile phone online compared to those who researched by visiting a store, 37% versus 17%, as we can see here. And this absolutely, to me, suggests that perhaps people are not gaining the benefits of seeing new phones in the flesh. Another challenge to some of the emerging brands looking to rein in the dominance of Apple and Samsung that I talked about earlier. And actually, interestingly, more than 1 in 5 people said they didn't even need to research at all. They already knew the phone they wanted, and perhaps unsurprisingly, this was highest amongst iPhone owners than Samsung customers. And about 1 in 7 people told us they sought recommendations. About 1 in 10 people used a price comparison website. And then we looked at the high street. We looked at trends in retail and purchasing in physical stores. And we asked if people can recall visiting a mobile phone shop in person over the past 6 months. And only 26% of people told us that they could, and that's down from 31% a year ago. As in our previous surveys, visits to mobile phone shops were higher among younger age groups, and that potentially is just because younger age groups have more time on their hands. Okay, I'm going to change tack once again. I'm going to talk about the pre-owned market and refurbs. Certainly a segment that we at CCS Insight are looking at very closely, with an awful lot of questions about this. The refurbished mobile phone market is small, but it is established, and we can see on the right-hand chart the number of people using a refurbished mobile phone as their primary personal device rose from about 4% in our 2018 survey to 8% in our last survey. So not huge, but certainly it's established, and we believe this growth is going to continue for plenty of reasons, one of which is greater supply of refurbished phones, cost of living concerns as well, of course. Refurbished phones offer good value for money, and sales of devices online as well. And actually it's important to note as well that people aged under 16 were not a part of this survey, but actually this is an important segment of the market that own pre-owned and refurbished mobile phones. So probably the share of refurb out of the entire population is higher than the 8% we're showing on this slide. Clearly though, buying brand new is still the majority way of purchasing. So over 80% said actually that their mobile phone was purchased brand new. So what could encourage people to take a refurbished mobile phone in the future? Actually, there were many reasons given when we asked this question. Notably, as we can see, an attractive price, but also if the device is in very good condition, if a warranty period is offered, if there's a money-back guarantee, and so on. The standout response, I think, for me was the 22% of people that listed helping the environment as a reason to consider buying a refurbished mobile phone. That being said, many people clearly are still very much set on having mobile phones bought brand new. A quarter of respondents, or nearly a quarter, 23%, said actually none of the listed options there would persuade them to consider taking a refurbished mobile phone. Now, I touched just now on the environment. In our research, we had a whole section around people's attitudes towards the environment and how it impacts their purchasing decisions and how they believe that's going to play out in the future. I'm just going to share one question from our survey with you, which I thought was really interesting. We asked if people were prepared to do any of the following to help the environment. And it does appear that people are prepared to pay more to help protect the planet, despite current cost of living concerns. So, for example, 17% of people would pay more for a sustainable mobile phone. 14% of people said they would be prepared to pay more to be with a mobile operator that does more for the environment. Now, that being said, of course, we recognise that although people may have good intentions when they fill out a survey, perhaps they do not always carry these out when making a purchase decision. Interestingly, consistently with our research around the environment, when we asked questions around sustainability and green issues, younger age groups showed far more interest and willingness to participate. I'm going to share just a quick slide on airtime purchases and then a couple of slides on interaction with telecom operators. So we asked another question, purely, how do you pay for your mobile plan? And this was actually one of our leading findings of our research this year, and that is the rise of SIM-only. So our data indicates that this type of plan is the most common now in the UK, overtaking the very traditional contract bundled with an airtime plan subscription. So 40% of people in the UK, according to our research, now take a SIM-only offer. That's up from 35% 12 months ago. That's shown in the blue bars. And there are many reasons behind this trend, the growing interest in SIM-only, including falling mobile phone sales, a very wide range of attractive SIM-only offers. I mean, you only need to go into a shop or look online to see how attractive some of these are. And of course, budget constraints due to some cost of living concerns. And the final area for me is around interacting with mobile operators. And I think it's actually very relevant given the last presentation. So we asked people how they expect to interact with their mobile operator over the next 6 months. And the main takeout here, as we can see, is that 3 of the top 4 methods were digital. So visiting a website, using an app, or using online chat. Now, I think on the one hand, this should offer a lot of encouragement to telecom operators, obviously seeking to cut costs through digital communication tools and automation techniques. But perhaps it also raises a few questions around the future of shops as well. Only 15% expecting to visit a physical mobile phone shop during the next 6 months. So that's the 5th ranked answer. Nearly 3 in 10 participants, 29%, said they don't expect to interact with their mobile operator at all over the next 6 months. Again, very relevant and interesting given Martina's presentation just now. And then the final slide for me on a similar theme, but probing specifically into the use of mobile operators' apps. So we asked people who have an app and use it, what do they expect to use it for? And in terms of people's usage of operators' apps, 2 main reasons emerged. So one was to check bills, and the other was to monitor usage. And those were actually the top 2 responses, as in our survey a year ago. But many other reasons for using apps emerged as well, including accessing loyalty schemes, browsing for mobile phones, browsing for accessories. Interestingly, nearly 1 in 10 people, 9%, told us they plan to trade in a mobile phone through an operator's app. And this actually is an important strategy for Vodafone, which is looking to digitalise the trade-in and part exchange experience. And that's it. I appreciate that was a pretty quick run through. I've thrown a lot of numbers, statistics, charts at you. I think I've covered a lot of ground, but I'm more than happy to take any questions, and I hope you found that interesting.
Anybody got any questions? Please, is Rob around? Have we lost Rob? We've lost Rob on the microphone. Okay, yell, please. Sorry, we can't really, well, I can't hear. Well, the gentleman in the pinkish shirt here. Sorry. Thank you. Sorry, thank you.
Hi, I'm Suresh Vasnani from Vodafone Group. Thank you very much for the presentation. It's really interesting numbers. I just wanted to check one thing, whether I understood that correctly. There were 2 points you mentioned. One was the younger population tends to be more digitally oriented, so more online searches, more research online. But then in the retail segment, you also mentioned it's the younger population that tends to visit the stores more often. Can you shed some more light on that?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I have to say, we discussed these results internally, and yeah, the fact that younger people are more willing and keen to purchase online perhaps is to be expected. The fact that they also were more frequent visitors to mobile shops did surprise us. I hypothesised that was because perhaps they just have a little bit more time on their hands, and maybe they've got more opportunities to do that, and maybe people, as they grow older and they have families and so on, perhaps are more time constrained and therefore perhaps more keen to adopt digital methods. But yeah, it was a part of the research that surprised me a little bit, and I wouldn't say I've got a definitive answer, but perhaps just more time on the hands is my best guess on that one.
Do you think maybe it's because they actually like getting their hands on the devices?
It could be, but I think that also raises a question around the future of mobile shops as well. So I think we're starting to see maybe a bit of an evolution of stores into more interesting formats. So going beyond just selling subscriptions and smartphones onto more experiential and entertaining places. And actually, on that basis, yeah, probably you would say that might be of more interest to younger people that could try out gaming, for example. I know that EE, for instance, has got gaming experiences in a lot of its shops. So perhaps that's an example of something that might be more appealing to a younger demographic.
Okay. Any more questions from anyone? Please, gentleman at the back. Rob, he's behind you.
Thank you. Great presentation, thank you. Just very quickly, any thoughts on the companies like Fairphone and sustainable phones where you can repair the handsets and go back to the world where we could change the batteries and stuff? Do you see a pattern where customers or the mainstream Nokia, Samsung and Apple going down that route, or Fairphone increasing their market share?
Fairphone have a very small market share. I think what they're doing is great. One area of the research that I didn't share was around repair, and we actually did ask a number of questions around people's willingness to repair their devices, and actually we saw quite a lot of positive intention to do that. I think what Fairphone's doing is fantastic. I think the bigger players, the Apples and the Samsungs, will slowly start to embrace some of those options a little bit more. In fact, we've already seen that with Apple, with the repair kits and so on. In terms of the environmental side of things, I think, yeah, the Fairphone model is great, but I think that ultimately customers probably will still pay for what they feel is the best phone and the best value. And I think there's probably a bit of a disconnect between what they like to do and what they actually ultimately eventually do. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge that Fairphone has. But it's a fantastic model. We've spoken to them on a number of occasions. They're actually a client of ours as well. Yeah, I wish them well, but we'll see, particularly in a cost of living situation, how that plays out.
Anybody else with any more questions? Do you think the cost of living crisis is going to continue? Suddenly you've turned into an economist. But I'm just wondering whether you think that might have quite a big impact on various of the issues that you looked at here. I mean, it seems to me a win for it for a while.
Yeah, I think the price rises probably hasn't been well timed. So last month or 2 months ago, we saw prices in the UK go up by up to 17.3%. That's a lot of money. And okay, on a £10 per month contract, that might be relatively manageable. On a £40 or £50 per month contract, that's a different story. So what we're going to be looking at a lot in our research this year is that starting to impact some new behaviour amongst customers? So are they interacting differently with their operator? Are they looking at changing their provider? Are they looking at downgrading and negotiating their tariff and so on? So I think that's definitely one element of it. And then the other element of perhaps the cost of living side of things is, does that discourage people from upgrading their phones more regularly? or does it encourage them perhaps to seek alternative options to traditional methods like buying new, for example, by buying refurbished and second-hand, or taking hand-me-downs and so on. And we're already seeing that, I think, a little bit in some of the numbers that are coming out on the mobile phone market recently, which is a relatively bleak story, I think, the prognosis for this year. So, yeah, there's a couple of trends we'll be keeping a close watch on there.